La la la, hey, 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 oh, ay, ay, INpowered Health, a podcast shedding light on how healing is an inside job. Keys to your inner power and total transformation. Discussing wholeness, wellness, and the effects of the mind on the physical and energetic parts of our being. A podcast to support you, moving from fear and pain into wellness and purpose. Belief, hope, connection, energetic keystones for transformation and inner power. Sacred knowledge that inspires us to look within, to find our own unique path. INpowered Health, release and rewire to become what you truly are, strong, whole, and empowered.
Hi everyone, this is Jayne and Shel, your naturopathic doctors, here to inspire and support you with your health journey.
We have with us today Karl Moore. Welcome, Karl.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Karl Moore is a physicist, homeopath, and writer. He has a PhD in experimental physics, having specialized in optics and electronics for the measurement of light in water. He spent most of a decade developing underwater laser-based imaging systems. He has been involved in testing EMF exposure. He is a licensed and registered homeopath and has recently written a book on the ubiquitous spiral motion of the universe, water and its regenerative forces, nature's twist in the spirals of life. His passion is in understanding nature and human potential, and is the host of the podcast, Made in Nature. Welcome, Karl, all the way from Ireland.
Karl,
Thank you very much.
it's so great to have you here and to have you explain about this beautiful book you've written in terms of the spiral nature of everything around us. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me to shut up if I go on for too long.
It's your passion.
Yeah, once I get going. So I suppose I should start off by saying why I wrote it. Many years ago, I heard the word homeopathy, and I knew it was a form of medicine that used water, and that you can make medicine out of water. And I found that fascinating. So I just sort of held that in my mind, and as time went on, I came across the work of Victor Schauberger, who was an Austrian forester, who had an incredible insight into water, and he talked about it spiraling, and when it did spiral, it would regenerate itself. And I remember about 20 years ago buying 4 of the books, and they were directly translated from German into English. And it wasn't using scientific language because Victor Schauberger wasn't a scientist. He would use his own terminology. But I knew there was something in it. So I would read little bits and I'd ponder it, and the years went by. And when I came back to Ireland, I took up studying homeopathy because I was interested and I had some time to do that. So on one side, I had the physics studying light and the interaction, or water and the interaction with light. And here I am now studying water as a form of medicine. So I went through the coursework, became a licensed and registered homeopath. And during that time, I was asking myself, I was challenged by the idea of why does homeopathy work? Because on one side, there's all these people telling us that it doesn't work. And yet I went through the whole praxis of it and seen that it did work. I also know in India, for example, they combine conventional medicine with homeopathy. It's not like one or the other. One does, they're together. And I thought that was interesting. I think they graduate like 10,000 students a year. So unless the whole subcontinent of India is completely, crazy, homeopathy works. So why is it accepted here and not there? So I took it upon myself to look into it. And as I was doing it, I also came across, that science couldn't explain things like remote connection, prayer, empathy, sympathy, the fact that the sunspots can have a cardiac effect, all these distance and remote effects. And this could not be really explained through this idea of just particles and matter. And this is important because in homeopathy, the reason why it's negated is because as you dilute it, it becomes more powerful, which is completely non-intuitive. So what's going on? And it's simply that it is no longer, it doesn't have to have matter. Matter is really just a form of energy. So everything is energy, and mass just seems to be an expression of that. And so we see that in Einstein's mass equivalent formula, E is equal to mc squared. There's an interchange. So when somebody says, homeopathy can't work, there's no atoms in it at all, it can't possibly work. Well, they're not taking into part the energetic side. Okay, so that's something that one has to bring in.
That is the most beautiful thing that you could say, because an atom is just energy, right? So there's a lot of energy besides just matter, which is, you're going to explain this in homeopathy.
Absolutely. And one of the things is, and maybe going off to the side here, but if you, what is an atom? What is a fundamental particle? It's really just energy spinning. And different atoms are different forms of spin, different configurations. It's just energy. Now, nobody can measure energy directly. It's always, we just measure the effect of energy. So the spiral, when it changes, you have different configurations, the toroid, you have jewel toruses, knots, all kinds of things, higher permutations. And when it spins, it changes the properties of the medium it's in. For example, if water, now we're getting back to water, which is good. Water isn't just molecules, individual molecules floating around or jostling around in liquid water. What happens is that these molecules, water molecules, actually join together and create different formations. In some cases, they can create things called coherent domains, where millions of water molecules will start to oscillate in unison. Excuse me. And when it does this, it takes up the size of 100 nanometers, which is about a fifth of the wavelength of light. So it's really small. But even within that, there's millions of these water molecules oscillating in coherency. And when it does this, they drop into a lower energy state. And without getting too technical, when it drops into a lower energy state, it is able to suck energy in. It's like having a well, a hole in the ground. Things can fall into it. But on top of this, that when it creates this coherent domain, the electrons are released, or they go into a very accessible state. It only takes a little bit of energy to excite them to be used for biological processes. So what happens is these things can absorb energy, and as what happens, I should say the electrons within the coherent domain, they're quasi-free, they're almost free, and they group together and they start to spin because of a fundamental physics property that all energy that is bounded has to spin or rotate, which is something that I didn't know until I, started this, which is really quite interesting, because then I started thinking about, you go to the zoo and you see a tiger in the cage, it paces back and forth, a bounded energy has to go around. So that's kind of my analogy in my head. But when these electrons spin, they can actually create a thing called a magnetic vector potential, which is much more powerful or much more far-reaching than a magnetic field. So, trying to simplify this, if you have this coherent domain, it can absorb the energies from around it and then broadcast them out again.
Right. So
And
it allows them to absorb the energy in this creation of moving around each other, Karl?
it's the fact that when they all move together, they go into a lower energy state. So I might be getting into the physics here, but when a lower energy state, it'll tend to suck things in.
Right. So, Karl, if you make a homeopathic remedy out of a certain substance, it carries the message of that substance. And
Yeah.
in this very high vibrational state. So is the message in the clumping? You know how the water clumps? Or can you just describe how the message of the specific substance from nature?
Yeah. Okay. So what happens is that, like I said, I didn't want to get too technical, but as this thing starts to absorb energy, its energy in this coherent domain starts to increase. But the way it expresses that is to increase its frequency. And as it increases its frequency, anything that is of the same frequency in the environment, it'll resonate with. It'll either absorb its energy or it'll give it energy. So if you have your medicinal substance, whether it's calendula, the marigold, or whatever, and you put it in the water, it can absorb this energy. Now, dilution's a part of this as well. That makes it stronger. I don't know if I should go into that at this point.
Well, yeah, because homeopathy, the more you dilute it, the stronger it gets. So please do.
Yeah. Okay. So what happens is, if it could be that if you have these coherent domains and they're getting charged up, if there's too many of them, they'll start to discharge with each other, and they won't have a far-reaching influence. But when you dilute it, they can't discharge, so they start to build up more and more energy. So it has a greater influence on the surroundings.
Oh,
so it becomes more powerful.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because it's kind
so
of difficult to get.
fascinating. That's
Yeah.
fascinating, Karl.
Now that's just one theory. This is the kind of the idea I like, because in homeopathy you have remedies that actually they're all dilutions, but some of the dilutions have the original substance in it, a small number of the original atoms. But then you get to a point when you get past the thing called Avogadro's number, is you're statistically not meant to have any of those original atoms of that substance left. But we can continue diluting, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So why is this? So there's another theory, and I don't think there's one theory. I think there's a number of different processes at work, but it's called the nanoparticle theory. So when you succuss something, succussing, by the way, is once you have your water solution, you give it an impact. And usually in homeopathy, that's the way you energize it in between dilution stages. So when you impact it, what is happening is that you might be breaking off some of the nanoparticles of the original substance, as well as parts of the glass vial and other things. And then when you go to the dilution stage, using the Korsakoff method, which is just taking a vial of water, you just empty it out and you add water to it. And the idea is that any remnant water from that remained from throwing it out will be there to inoculate the fresh water that you add for the next dilution. Mm-hmm. So in homeopathy, I might be going too quick here, is every time you do a succussion and a dilution, you have another level of potency. And you keep repeating that, you can go higher and higher and higher. And interesting is, higher and higher you get, it seems to have a more energetic effect. You're going to, so usually higher remedies, and generally speaking, they're let's say they have an affinity for more energetic, ephemeral type aspects, such as mind, mental, psychological issues, whereas the lower potencies, and this is just generally speaking, tend to be more for physical, local issues.
So getting back to the water, because human beings are 90% water, is there something that we can do to create this spiraling effect of our water being?
Well, in the body, there's another thing, and because like getting back to the water, it's not just it forms coherent domains that you can create nanoparticles, but it can do other things, which is quite interesting. And one of these is water changes its properties when it's in small confined spaces. It also changes its property in the presence of a hydrophilic substance, a water-loving substance, and which a lot of the biological tissues are. Now, what happens is that they found using a hydrophilic material that when they put water in it, well, they have water and they put this hydrophilic sheet in the water. And in the water, they also have microparticles, little particles, so you can see what's going on. And what they found is that there was a clear zone was being formed between this hydrophilic surface and the rest of the water with these little microbeads in it, microparticles. And this thing was called an exclusion zone. And an exclusion zone water is where it starts to form like a semi-crystal. It's almost like a liquid crystal. And when it forms, it pushes all the solutes, any other contaminants out. It can only be water. That's why it's called exclusion zone water or easy water. And this is the guy. This has been around for a while, but Jerry Pollack at the University of Washington, he's totally onto this, and he describes it as the fourth phase of water, and it seems to be that it's a state between ice and liquid water. It's more like a gel. And interesting, what this gel does is it acts. What they found is that when they put, because it does this separation, they found that it actually generates a charge of about 100 millivolts. And that is quite fascinating because you put water near the substance and it becomes a battery. A neutral substance like water suddenly develops a charge. Why is this? This is interesting. And it occurs within in the tissues, in the small areas of our body. And what they also found is if they shone light on this experiment that I just described, it causes this exclusion zone to increase radically and generate more charge. And the light that they found that when they shone light on it, this is what happened. And the light was in the near infrared. The near infrared radiation is all around us. So what is being postulated here is that we could be deriving energy for our biology through water by absorbing light and energy from around us, which is fascinating because it's not all food. We're absorbing light energy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, Karl, just going back to the dilutions and how homeopathy becomes stronger as you dilute it more.
Yeah.
How does our body receive that message? Do you have some comments on that? Because you said the higher dilutions are mental and the lower are physical. Just any thoughts on how it, because like cures like, and
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure I can answer it to any satisfaction, only to say that we're, like Shelby says, we're 99% water molecularly and 70% by weight. And our remedies are energized water. So I think it's through water. There's also talk of water as being the medium that connects us to the quantum informational field that underlies everything in reality to the expression of matter in this world. Water seems to be a magical substance in that regard. So I think there's something going on there. Now, having said that, I know that there's, who is it now? Hammeroff and Penrose, in 1996, they published a paper where they believed that water was the basis of consciousness.
Really? Like the medium of it? That the
Yeah,
water is
yeah,
in
water.
consciousness?
Yeah, and they say as many different states of water, there's as many different states of consciousness. So this is what these guys are talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, and it occurs within the microtubules that are within the cell. Now the cell is full of structured water. That's another name for it when water starts to form these configurations. It's not just random H2O molecules. They form these things. But it's always been difficult to measure because it's just water. It's, but the properties of the water change. Another example is carbon. If carbon comes in different forms, if it comes in the form of sheets, that's like graphite in your pencil. But if it forms into a little pyramid, a tetrahedron, it's a diamond. And
Right.
try writing with the diamond. But it's the same carbon atoms, but in a different configuration. So configuration is very important and with water. And water seems to be doing this all over the place. But they haven't been able to measure it really until the last couple of decades. There's been some brilliant scientists who have been, knew that there was something special about water. And for years, when biochemists or biologists were analyzing the cells to see what's in them, they would take the cells and they would dry them out, get rid of the water, because that's just H2O. And then they'd measure what was left and they'd say, it's an insulator. But when you add water to it, which you have to, it becomes a dynamic thing and it becomes a semiconductor with all other kind of electrical properties.
Right.
So
Yeah.
So it's the configuration of the water that changes, that
the
creates
properties.
different energies
Yeah,
with whatever it's holding. It can be a medium,
yeah,
consciousness,
yeah, yeah. And what it's picking up around in its environment.
and what it's able to grab and release.
Yeah. And so homeopathy seems to be a way of and Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, must have found this by accident, a process where he was able to amplify that signal by so many succussions or impacts in a vial, and how much dilution. You seem to get it right. Now, it's also known, for example, things spiral, they seem to energize, like African shamans. I'm sure other shamans have done this too. They would put their substance in a barrel of water and roll it down a hill to energize it. And this was like magical potion. So
Yeah.
it's this whole thing of spinning.
Yeah.
It's,
So, Karl, the form of water that we drink must also be extremely important, where it comes from, how energized it is in healing and health.
absolutely.
Yeah,
That's,
can you just talk about that? That's exciting.
yeah. I just happened to be listening to a lecture on this exclusion zone water. And because it's energizing, they were saying that it's present in quality water. Well, let me go back. It seems to be in small spaces. So when you do juicing, you're getting this easy water, which is really good for us. It seems to be, that's a quality water because it's pure and it's energized. You also, ice water that melts is also meant to be very good. These sort of things. So it's a form of water. But in general, water, there's different ways of measuring the energy of water. And people have done experiments on it. There's water that has no energy and it's bereft, it doesn't do anything. And then there's water that's really highly energized and pure. And that depends on its history, what's happened to it. So like if you drink water that comes from an artesian well, that's water that comes up. The water almost has levitational qualities to it because it's so energized. And it usually, at artesian well, the water, it won't come up if it's exposed to sunlight. And that's why the second wells, they used to cover them from the sunlight. If they didn't, the water would disappear. So I suppose what I'm saying is that there's an energy, and with that energy, water begins to act almost like a living thing. And so on the other side of it, the water that we drink, it might be chemically pure, but it can be bereft of energy. Some people say distilled water, it's very pure, But other people would, well, Victor Schauberger would have described it as hungry water. It's not good because it's not mature. It's not able to nourish, but it might actually take away. So you get these different sorts of properties of water. But our water is treated with so many things, and it's if you think of our municipal power, water supply, it courses through pipes, bends and pipes, narrow constrictions. It gets hammered if it goes through an industrial, process or machinery. And when it comes out the tap, it's tired. But that's not even talking about the impurities that are in it.
Yeah.
We add things, and I think chlorine gets beat up a lot. I mean, it's a poison, but adding chlorine to water is probably one of the best things for health, because it's killed all the pathogens. But it's not ideal. If you have artesian water that comes out of a natural spring, it's already purified. So nature can do this.
Yeah. Karl, I listened to a program, or there's a website called Dancing with Water, and what they do, well, the water I like to drink is distilled, but it is also has not enough energy or power. So they suggest spinning it and adding in back in organic minerals that the body can take on. And so it's like a vortex machine that you put your water in and re-energize it.
Yep. And I think Victor Schauberger was doing that. He was purifying water, and he was adding things called carbones. That was his term for, like, I guess, biological material or things that were good, like minerals and carbon-based minerals. And then he would spin it, and then it was okay. But just before I go, I wanted to mention that spinning in some of the experiments that I found, the connection between homeopathy and spin came when I was reading some scientific papers. One was by Luc Montagnier, who was a Nobel Prize winner for, discovering the HIV, what was it now? He was able to transmit a virus he was able to record the virus information and replicate it in virgin water by passing it through wires. So Luc Montagnier, what he did was, to energize the water, he would put it in a magnetic stirrer. He would stir it. It had to be stirred, otherwise it wouldn't work. And Hahnemann himself said that, just diluted water, if you just dilute it, it's not energized. And then I was going, well, what's the thing? And the African shamans were spiraling it down the hill, and I go, well, what's happening in succussion? There's no spinning. And then I went, there is, because when you succuss something, you create a shock wave. And when you create a shock wave, you create vortices, but they're really small ones, really tiny ones. Mm-hmm. So it's the idea of the vortex being operative in all these variations or things that I've been talking about. So that was the connection with homeopathy. And then you had the coherent domain with the spinning electrons. And then when you succuss it, you add energy to them, you increase the frequency, and it broadcasts more and all that.
Yeah, just so our listeners know, succussing is when you bang something, when you bang it hard against another substance or something hard.
Yeah, right. I was using the word impact.
Impact or succuss. Yeah, very good. Yeah. So that's how the message is given in the water.
Yeah, well, that's the way it can take in information. It can energize itself and broadcast it out to seed other virgin water. Does it electrically, epitaxically, probably more, a syllable more in there than I needed. Epitaxially, yeah, that's it. So there's that aspect. This is what happens. So we're being energized by water and our surroundings. We're directly connected. We're absorbing energy all around us. And through water, it might be the best way of getting information into our body, because we are water. We're electromagnetic beings that are water-based.
I remember when I read The Hidden Messages of Water by Masaru Emoto, and he was showing that, he would take a water droplet and he would expose it to beautiful music, and it would become this very unique crystal. And then he would take another water droplet and he would expose it to very angry music, and it would become a very opaque, dark looking water droplet, which kind of resembles a cancer cell under a microscope. And then he extracted this information to basically say, we are 90% water. So the words, the energy, the thoughts, that is actually deciding whether we become a dark, cloudy cell or a very brilliant, light-filled cell. And my mind was blown then. But with you saying that this water has the ability to almost hold consciousness, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it all ties in. I'd forgotten about Emoto, Masaru, and all that. But he became very popular because you could actually see it. It was a simple experiment. Now you had to freeze the crystals, and that part of it, in capturing that was a little difficult. You need a nice refrigerated environment and stuff, and a microscope. But yeah, it's the direct. You can see that, so it all makes sense. So that our thoughts become very important for our health, and there's the mind-body connection. And it's like how we think affects our body, and how our body affects our thinking. They're not separate. I suppose I think that our minds are different from our hearts. Our heart is able to is directly connected to our environment. And this is something I talk about in my book, because I see the heart is not so much a pump, but as a vortex creating machine. It makes the blood spiral.
Mm.
It also has a magnetic field that can be measured out to 12 meters. And so even with conventional equipment, well, it's very expensive conventional equipment, and it can measure it. So I was thinking that it could take in information, write it into the blood through the heart, and spread it all through the body. And equally so, the heart can also radiate that field so that somebody else can pick it up. And so somebody can sense the health of another person, or what they're thinking, or empathize. So it's this water seems to be the basis of everything. And let me just say this is, for years they were saying, oh, I wonder if there's water on Mars, if there's water on this and that. And water's everywhere. That's my contention. And now they're finding it even out in Pluto, on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. But then again, what is water? It's just hydrogen, the most ubiquitous elements in the universe, and oxygen, which I think is like third. And you combine them, you have water.
Mm.
So it's everywhere. And so if you have water everywhere, then you should have life everywhere, and you should have consciousness everywhere.
And the spiral is everywhere.
And the spiral is everywhere because the universe has a vertical aspect to it. I mean, Einstein said that gravity was due to the curvature of space-time. Curvature. So you have this built-in curve, and the magnetic electrical fields. A magnetic field is curved. It's circular. You pass a current through a wire, it propagates a circular field. I'm going off here, but Newton had always said, he talked about forces between things as a straight line phenomena. But it's actually the first movement is what I say, I agree with, should I say, is that the first movement is to curve, not to go in a straight line, but to curve. It bends, and everything curves at some level. And I think if we start to understand that and apply that to all the phenomena we know, things become a lot more simple, and we're no longer restricted to the sort of the physical realm, but we see the energetic realm as something that we touch into. And matter is just a more, let's say, a more superficial aspect of it that we've become very used to seeing and judging things by. And we need to get beyond that now. That was fine in the old days, but not anymore. So the idea that we should be stuck with pharmaceuticals all the time, which are just drugs, and this is another thing. When you there's something that's not well in the let's say in the medical world, in the biological world, there's a thing called hormesis, which is, it's like a sweet spot. When you go down to really, really small amounts of a substance, the biology will react. If it's too low, it won't. If it's slightly too high, it won't. It has to be just right. You get a nonlinear effect. You get a huge response. And that's kind of sort of supports the idea of homeopathy, because homeopathy is a resonance phenomena. And the idea of what the practitioner tries to do is try to find the right resonance. When he does that, boom, you get this wonderful effect. And so, and if it misses, if you miss that resonance, nothing happens. No damage, no toxicity. And sometimes what a homeopath has to do is they might prescribe something and nothing happens. That's not a loss. That's telling you, it's not this way. I need to go this way. And so with the homeopath, you need to stay with them, and they're triangulating in to get the right remedy. And when they get that resonance, boom, you get wonderful, powerful response. I might have gone off there a bit.
No, but that's why a homeopath spends an hour, 2 hours finding the exact remedy, the exact potency, and when you do find it, there's very quick reaction that is really starts to move things in the right direction. So it's a beautiful description.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great.
Still hanging on the fact that our heart has an electromagnetic field of 12 meters. That's
probably more. That's all we can measure.
That's all we can measure.
And that's just the magnetic field. There's the magnetic potential, which probably isn't far-reaching. But let me explain this: is when you think of a particle, a fundamental particle called the quanta, you might think of like a little ball bearing or something like that. But it's not. When you get down, that's only one appearance of it. What it really is energy. It's a wave. And so you have the duality of nature. Is it a wave? Is it a particle? At this level, our macroscopic level, everything is particles. But as you get smaller and smaller, these particles become evasive. They start to become more energetic, and it becomes a wave. So what is a wave? This wave, for every particle, it stretches to the ends of the universe. It's in contact with everything.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the field.
Yeah, so what you have is you have a quanta, which may appear as an isolated particle in one instance. It really is connected to everything in the universe.
Wow.
Every single particle.
So that's how we feel each other and can get thoughts from across the world and can heal each other in this field.
Yeah, the quantum informational field.
Yeah.
And that's even why, how does a seed become a tree? Or how does an embryo turn into, a fully, like an elephant or something like that? And Rupert Sheldrake called it the morphic field. There's this informational field, this memory. And so our biology through water might be accessing this informational field. And if there's a breakdown in that communication, it may not develop properly or whatever. But water seems to be the conduit between this quantum informational field, this energetic matrix at the basis of reality, and everything in the world that we see around us. And homeopathy's right in there as a very powerful medicine, which is, the more I look at it, the more unbelievable it gets, and its potential is huge. I mean, you use the word homeopathy, it has all these connotations to it. We need to get beyond that. Some people make remedies, but they call them infoceuticals and other names. And I'm just sort of jostling around here, but as regards to consciousness, I went to the water conference in Bulgaria in 2016, and they have it every year. And the last one was in Germany last year, and they have all kinds of scientists, Nobel Prize winners, amazing stuff. And so when you go in there, and homeopathy is a given that it works, absolute given. There was people in there talking about, being able to use water to communicate over long distances by one focusing their intent on a glass of water or a vial of water in another country. They were able to measure electrical properties changing due to the intention of a group of people far away. And all kinds of mad experiments where they got this easy water, getting back this, which is like a gel. And what they did was they created this by, well, they collected it and they got rid of the free water. And what they were left with was a white powder, which was pure hydrogen and oxygen. This was the easy water desiccated, I think. But that doesn't mean anything because it is water. You know, desiccated is without water, but this is water. But it became as a solid. Water became a solid, not as ice, but as a powder. And it's just amazing type things that are going on on that realm.
So, Karl, when you get together with these great minds, they absolutely agree that, of course, homeopathy works.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Karl, this information is amazing. What would you like to see happen in the field of health?
I think medicine is really good. Our conventional medicine is great in what it can do as regards like MRI scans and looking into the body, but it's far too reliable on pharmaceuticals and the idea of suppressing symptoms. And this is a big problem because if you, like for example, in children who have eczema, the skin and the lungs are connected. So for example, a child who exhibits eczema and they go to the doctor, they might prescribe hydrocortisone, which suppresses it. The skin looks good, but then the child develops asthma later. Not always, but this is the relationship. So what I'm saying here is that by getting rid of what's one symptom, by suppressing it, it's going to pop up as an illness somewhere else. It has to be expressed properly and it has to be balanced. And that's one of the things that homeopathy does, because it goes beyond the material and it goes to the energetic level to bring back that balance. So it's on a lot. So what I would like to see, I'd like all our medicines to be water-based. And you know, homeopathy is brilliant. I think healers and their ability, energy medicine, should be more respected and more mainstream instead of this continual, you know, calling it like secondary names. You know, people seem to default to the pharmaceutical world and things like vaccines and stuff like that. You know, I meant to use that word, but it's you know, the idea of putting kind of poisons that bypass the immune system just to create some sort of immunity doesn't make any sense. On top of that, giving children vaccinations before their immune systems are developed. I see these as problem areas. And I think we need to get back to understanding how nature works. And homeopathy is a beautiful medicine because, and this is going back to what we said at the beginning, is you can create your own medicines. All you need is water, perhaps a wee bit of alcohol, and a strong hand, and the medicinal substance, and you can create your own medicines. And that's just really empowering, and probably a threat to a lot of, let's say, monopolies out there.
Yeah. The more empowered we become, the less we need conventional pharmaceuticals, which make somebody a lot of money.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say these things aren't useful at certain times. I mean, antibiotics, you know, sometimes are great, but the fact that we jump to them right away without actually dealing with, you know, if we have a headache and you take an aspirin, no, maybe you just need a bit more water. Maybe you need more sleep. You know, it's this kind of thing. It's the idea of jumping to a magic pill, that there's a pill for every ailment. That's not how it works.
Yeah, agreed.
Do you think there's going to be a point in our future where we won't even have to take the homeopathic pellet? We'll just be able to interact with these substances in nature, take them into our electrical magnetic force?
That is a brilliant, brilliant question. I love that one.
Thinking, girl,
that is really good. I wished I would have said that.
you
No,
just
that is
inspired
good.
me to
I
say
think
it,
so.
You know?
I think so. I think so. You know, the way some people can actually be good energy, good medicine for people, for others, you know. Absolutely. I think we have that capability. And that's one of the things, if you raise your energy, as they say, you have a clear mind, and also coherency between the heart and the mind, between the body and the mind. Now you can resonate far. You can be coherent. You can tap into things far away and sense those energies. You can through intention. It starts to sound really almost magical. But this is, I think so.
That is
I know this could be another podcast.
We could just even be one with a dolphin, like intermix our energy fields and spend time with that energy. And I think it would create a lot more respect for nature as well.
Yeah. Well, because the other thing is we have evolved. Our bodies are in constant communication with their environment. We're picking up all these subtle sensations and feelings, and a very few of them actually get up into a consciousness, into our kind of the verbal thought consciousness area, where we only take in a very small amount of information. So if we're not feeling too good, you go out into nature and by a tree and the grass and the wind and the sun. These are the things that our biology knows really well. It's evolved with it. So when we put ourselves in that environment, our bodies have a conversation and they negotiate and things go back into balance again. And that's why we feel good. And then our thoughts go, oh, I feel good. But our whole body and our being has been immersed in this wonderful environment. So I find myself, I go out to nature and I like looking at clouds. It does something to me, it connects. But yeah, it's just to contrast that now, I have to say that as we're electromagnetic beings, if we are in artificial environments with artificial frequencies that our bodies have not evolved with, they are trying to interpret, they're trying to communicate with, they're trying to understand. And if you have artificial frequencies, and I'm referring to electromagnetic frequencies, they can cause decoherence of the water within us, and it kind of acts as a noise in the background. It's like somebody playing music next door. You can't quite hear yourself, and it gets louder. You might miss the translation. So our bodies, the communication within our bodies might be breaking down because of the presence of these these electromagnetic fields that we're not made for. And now we're covered in them. And that's one aspect to consider.
And even 5G is going to become even a greater influence on our bodies.
Yeah. On top of that, but I mean, even simple things like when electricity was first put in, it's known to have caused health effects. There's correlations, and every time we implement a new technology, there seems to be health effects associated with it. And then we seem to adapt to it, but it might not be. We're doing the best we can. It's not the optimal adaptation. We're finding a kind of a common ground, but it's not ideal state. It's not actually good for us. It may not be the best. So we're going down this road with all this technology, and I'm thinking the way things are going, we may be forced to have our bodies upgraded at the genetic level to be able to tolerate all these artificial signals.
Mm-hmm.
So by creating them, we're forced to get these upgrades, implants, genetic modifications that we have to pay for. And if we don't, well, bye-bye. So,
Oh, that's a
yeah,
scary.
that's it's
That's a
scary.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I can go on about all the electromagnetic stuff and 5G. Just to say with the 5G, that there's absolutely no evidence that causes any ill health effects. And the reason for that is there's no studies. No independent studies have been funded.
Yeah.
And there's no liability. So they're putting up satellites, thousands of satellites in the sky that will be beaming these high frequency 5G radiations at us. And we will have towers up all over our cities beaming this stuff so we can get faster response time. And this is not just for getting, downloading movies faster. It's actually a grid network in which we can control driverless cars and robots and drones, as well as be able to know exactly where everybody is. So in that regard, the fact that there's no health studies and it's being rolled out, and we already know that we're electromagnetic beings, and we know that there's effects from the earlier technologies, 4G, 3G, etc. The World Health Organization in 2012 said that the radiation coming from cell phones is it's a class 2B carcinogen. It's a possible carcinogen. The World Health Organization said that.
Yeah.
Which is, there's question marks over this, and yet we're just unleashing this across the world. So
It seems a little bit reckless.
yeah, it does. Unless, yeah. And I don't think people are demanding faster speeds. I think what I'm hearing from people is that they're getting tired of looking at their cell phones and computers, and they want less information.
Mm-hmm.
In one regard. So one has to question where the push for this is. I mean, there's lots of money to be made because you're going to have all these new technologies, a whole new world coming out, and it opens up a plethora of innovation and technology, and I think that's where the drive is. And the idea that there's an idea in the scientific world that the energies are so small they can't have any effect on our biology. But they're forgetting that everything within our body is dictated by electromagnetics. Even the way we smell, even the way the ligand, lines up with the receptor of the cell. It's all guided through electromagnetism. And so if you have an artificial source, as Newton once said, to every action there's always an opposite and equal reaction. And so when you have these artificial frequencies, they're going to have a reaction. The question is it safe? And that's where you get a lot of wiggle room and debate. Because as you know, in homeopathy, everybody's different. That's why you have to prescribe a uniquely different remedy. Not necessarily, but you have to look at the person and then prescribe, because there's usually a few remedies for the one thing.
I'm still pondering, and just want to talk a little bit more about coherence, how the heart and mind is connected, and our thoughts would either bring us into coherence or out of coherence, and so fear energy must bring us out. So I just wanted to bring it back to coherence by talking about, get out into nature, lay on the earth, think positive thoughts, and connect to your heart. Could you just comment on that?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of all the research they've done at the Heart Math Institute, where they do coherence between, when you meditate, your heart and mind go into coherent state. And when you are fearful or upset, you get all this kind of jiggly stuff, and it doesn't resonate with anything. It's you're not centered. So when you have a coherent state, then that's why in meditation you tend to go towards a coherent state. And when you go towards a coherent state, you tend to be more connected, because when you have a coherent state, the noise level goes down. The background noise goes down. I won't go into that too much. And so when you have less noise, then you're able to pick up smaller signals, more subtle signals, the subtle signals that we need to register. So when we're all fearful and fretful, we can't even contemplate it, but our bodies are probably not even able to respond to those subtle signals. So maybe this is why people meditate, and they're able to feel connected with the universe. So there's all that's coherence, and like I say, even the exclusion zone water, that's a coherent state. The vortex is a pseudo-coherent state. It's not, because you don't have water molecules all jostling around. They start to follow each other in a spiral. And so that's a state of coherence. That's the vortex drops into a lower energy state, which is able to receive information then. That's probably putting it in simple terms. But as you said, when you go out into nature too, and you walk barefoot on the grass, you're also absorbing electrons from the earth to energize yourself and put yourself into balance. So that's another aspect. So nature's good for us. And when we're walking around now with insulator type shoes, some people believe that might be isolating us from the earth and causing health problems. Apparently there's some correlation between when we change from leather soles, which were somewhat conductive, to, you know, the rubbers and the plastics that we have nowadays. So it's an interesting.
Do you see any benefit when people are around ocean waves or waterfalls? Or, like, I know a lot of people, including myself, we long to be around the ocean waves. We, you know, sometimes people listen to them at night to sleep. Do you think that helps get our water and our being energized?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, the waves. Well, yeah, that's just this spiraling motion. It's another form. It's up and down. You know, instead of going like this, it's just going up, but it's a wave. It's a natural wave, and it's there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, all the elements in the water. You got magnesium. If you walk on a sandy beach, you know, you're really connecting to the earth because you got that extra conduction quality. You're absorbing minerals, but even the sound of the ocean, it's what they call like pink noise. It has a small rhythm to it, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. You know, you have these ebb and flow type sounds, and that's just another cycle, up and down, like the seasons, hot and cold,
Mother Nature's
day and night.
heartbeat.
And everything pulses. Yeah, everything has to pulse to be alive. Everything has to pulse to be in this space-time.
Yeah. Shel said Shel was saying it's Mother Nature's heartbeat.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
kind of is. Like,
Yeah,
I know when I'm by the ocean, my heartbeat starts to match the rhythm of the waves. So
yeah.
it must be very healing.
And brings us into coherence.
Karl, if you were given a serious terminal health diagnosis, like a cancer, and you were given a prognosis of 2 years, how would you approach the news?
Well, this is purely hypothetical,
Purely hypothetical.
because unless one is in that situation, you know what? Because sometimes I question myself. It's like, if I was diagnosed, would I rush off and get chemotherapy or something? Or am I going to be, oh no, I'm just going to go all natural? Well, right now, I'd say, oh, yeah, I'll go all natural and stuff. But to actually be in the situation is different. So I just want to state that before I harp on about the natural way. Probably, ideally, what I would do is, the first thing that comes to my mind is to cleanse. And that seems to be like the Gershon method of, you know, taking juicing really good dark green vegetables, that sort of thing, support the organs, support the cleansing process, the detox. I think the detox is important. Stay away from electromagnetic fields. Spend time in nature. It would be on those kind of lines, sort of, rather than going after the cancer as an enemy, I would support the body, support the immune system, and to fortify it so it can drive off the cancer, as it were. Because the cancer, many people have, well, this goes into a whole other thing as to actually what cancer is. Some people believe it's a form of a fungus. There's an Italian doctor believes it, and he was treating the more superficial cancers that were easily accessible. That's what I meant by superficial there. He was injecting, tumors like on the surface of the skin or something with sodium bicarbonate because it would change the pH, and the fungus cancer couldn't survive. But that may be quite simplistic, because if you get something deeper within the body, it's harder to access. But my idea would be, my way would be to really fortify the body. Make sure that we have the right vitamins from natural foods, organic stuff. Like I say, and homeopathic remedies. There's different therapies in that end. Energy medicines. Some people, I was working with the group there who use homeopathy, a bioresonant form of homeopathy, where they see mercury as being the basis of most of our problems, because it's difficult to get out of the body. But it has all kinds of problems for health. I would see cancer as a disease of the environment. I think if we have a really healthy environment, and I mean by surroundings and the foods that we take and the nutrition and all that, and that can only help. Now, it depends on how far the person has gone, too, or where the cancer is. Because there's, chemotherapy is about a 2 to 3% survival rate. That's in general. But then again, if it's targeted, it might be good in certain instances. Or there's a way just to. But if it's systemic, it becomes more difficult, I would imagine. But the pleomorphic theory, or the idea of the germ versus the germ theory versus the terrain, it's the idea that it's the state of the environment that dictates what appears, what microorganisms come to the surface. And I got involved in live blood analysis, and I have a dark field microscope, and you take the blood and you look at it, and you can see the cells. But if you leave it for a while, you get all these other things forming in the blood. So I left my blood sample there for a day or so, and I came back, and my God, the things I saw in it were frightening. But these things are known as endogenous microorganisms, meaning that the reason why they appear, whether it's a fungus or a parasite or a bacteria, it's because of the state of the terrain. It's the state of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the analogy, you may have heard of it before, if you get a block of cheese and it's old and it has mold on it, if you just take the mold off it, you haven't really got rid of the underlying problem, because the mold will reappear again because of the state of the cheese.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to change the ground in which these things appear. Now, the pleomorphic theory, that was developed by Professor Enderlin over 100 years ago, I believe. But I think I even see that, like, there's the energy field of the body, and that dictates how we manifest. I also see the earth as a body. Just to give you an example, they found 253 different microorganisms that existed only in the Arctic oceans and the Antarctic oceans. And there's no way that they could have passed through the equator, because the waters would have been too warm for them to survive. So I believe that as we have our own biofield, the Earth has its own biofield. And depending on the state of the energy on the planet in those areas, certain organisms appear. And so I see it all collectively. I just had an interview with a homeopath who does agrohomeopathy, applying homeopathy to plants and animals. And that was fascinating too. So it's the idea, and you prescribe in the same way as you would with the human, but you have to anthropomorphize the plant or the environment. But the point I wanted to make was, when you look at the plants on the surface of the earth or a field, that's because of the state of the soil. And for example, I had some building work done, and the builders plowed over a lot of garbage I didn't know about. And all these weeds, these horrible weeds, appeared for the next few years. And then they went away. I could see every year different sorts of weeds appearing. And then it went back into like the rest of the field. And I'm going, that's interesting. Those weeds are only there because the soil was disturbed or polluted. And now the earth has these weeds have different root lengths that tap down into the soil and bring up different nutrients to the top. And when they die, they do all this, different root structures bringing up different minerals. They're all helping to bring the earth back into balance. So an agrohomeopath, when he wants to know what's wrong with the soil, he looks at the weeds and prescribes. In the same way a homeopath would say, or if that's the right word, a patient, he tries to find the symptoms, because it's all about how the person is, a homeopath tries to see how that person is in their world, how they're perceiving the world, in the same way that the soil is trying to get back into balance.
And it's such a reflection of the mind, and really the symptoms are like a weed, like our disease symptoms are like a weed. I love your analogy.
Yeah. And sometimes we see them like, real manifestations like boils. You might get a crop of boils because you're stressed or something like that, or, and the mental state when somebody's gone really grumpy and or depressed. And so these are the signs. And so it's the same way you prescribe based on that. You know that this is not normal, so you address that. In the same way you look at agrohomeopathy, you might look at plants and say, why has it got aphids? Why, the little bugs, and it could be a mineral imbalance in the soil. And there's different ways to treat it. You can do it by the soil, or you can get, I'm going into agrohomeopathy here, or you can get a predator. You can get a predatory species in homeopathic form. And like for aphids, they use the ladybug potentized because it eats the aphids. So when you water your roses or things that collect or attract aphids with coccinella is the name of it, the ladybird remedy, the plant absorbs that through its roots, and I guess it just deters the aphids from coming near it because it senses the presence of a ladybird. Or the more precise, a better explanation is that it may heal the susceptibility of the plant to attract aphids.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's holding the energetic field of the predator.
Yeah, and then you have companion plants like onions and carrots work together, potatoes and beans, basil and tomatoes. So because they strengthen each other, and there's less likely they'll fall prey to disease or pests when you plant them together, because for whatever reason. But let's say you didn't have enough room to plant onions with your carrots. You could put Allium cepa, which is the red onion, or an onion remedy in water form, and you water your carrots with that. They will sense the love of their companion.
Oh, that's so
Protected by it.
beautiful. That's so beautiful, Karl.
And Karl, just to finish up, how would that work in our human world? It's a form of coherence.
Yeah, our symbiosis, our being in touch with that which we know helps us. What is good for us. I don't know. I'm speculating here, but it's maybe the carrots are on their own, but if the onions are there too, it may be like a child with its parents rather than just being on its own. Yeah, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
It makes me think like maybe I'm going far too out there now, but if we could take a homeopathic remedy of our partner, if they ever passed away first, we could have that energy around us.
That's
Wow, that's deep.
That's deep.
Yeah,
We need less Ayamara and grief
but
release.
that's interesting. But another thing is, I had this idea, and it was the idea that if you were, and this is an idea I had, for example, if you were able, when you were in the prime of your life, fully strong, 17, 18, if you were able to record all our vibrations,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? The vibrations of our organs, the way we think, everything like that, and record it. And then when we get older, go into a room and play those frequencies back or be subjected to those frequencies, we may resonate, or we may go back. It may be a healing, may have some healing capacity to it to bring us back to our youth. Because I know in like nursing homes and stuff, you have debilitated seniors there who won't respond to anything, and you play the music from maybe when they were in their prime of their life, they start dancing and singing and they start remembering stuff.
Mm.
So that's kind of, so it's all this idea of energy and resonance and vibration. It's huge. I think that's where medicine is.
It's like energetic stem cells, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
neat.
And we could talk about stem cells and Bruce Lipton with his stem cells in 4 petri dishes and put them in 4 different environments. And the same stem cells, depending on the environment, would become a tissue, a brain cell, a blood cell, or, they would become different depending on the environment they were put in. And I think even Einstein said, as regards he said, the sole governing property of the particle is the field.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the same kind of concept at the basis, at the fundamental particle level, as we do for our own health. And so that's why I say we can only be as healthy as our environment in the long run. I mean, you can be healthy and go into a polluted environment. But then after a while, you can only be good as your environment.
Yeah, so the coherence with our environment affecting us and our mind, and the fact that we're all energetic beings, and really being aware of that. You brought some beautiful information to us today, Karl. Thank you so much. I want to acknowledge your incredible information, and I want to just thank you for coming and joining us from Ireland.
And thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. It's lovely meeting both of you and talking to you.
Enjoyed it.
We could keep talking and talking and talking, but we'll break it into segments.
Yeah, I think we'll have you back, Karl.
Fantastic.
It seems like this has only scratched the surface.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much. I'm trying to. I could go deeper, and there's probably I'd like to delve in and check facts and stuff. But this is kind of an overview of things. So I've kind of bounced around a bit, but we've touched on the important aspect, which is we should start thinking in terms of energy and vibration and the influence that has. Even the way we think is huge. The mind-body relationship. So. Yeah, thank you, Jayne.
Thank you, Karl. And that's so for everyone out there. We want to say, don't give your power away to anyone else, and
just go be you.